the left! Go, go, go!
You know, when you look at the world's most intense conflicts, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, there's one country's name that just keeps popping up: Iran. It's a really complex and powerful player on the world stage. But why? Why is it involved in so many different flashpoints? How did this web get so tangled? Well, let's unravel it.
So, what does Iran actually want? How did it end up right at the center of all this, seemingly at constant odds with the US, with Israel, and with Saudi Arabia? To really get to the bottom of it, we have to look at what's driving their decisions. All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we're going to dig into the history that really forged Iran's worldview. Then, we'll map out its modern-day alliances and rivalries, its whole web of conflict. And finally, we'll unpack the core strategy that drives pretty much everything it does on the world stage.
Okay, so to understand Iran today, you absolutely have to look back. And I don't just mean a few decades. We're talking about a national memory that stretches back from millennia. And believe me, it shapes everything.
Think about this for a second. At its absolute peak, the Persian Empire was home to 50 million people. Now, that might not sound like a crazy number today, but back then, that was possibly as much as half of the entire global population. That kind of history creates this powerful national memory of grandeur, of influence. It's this deep-seated belief that Iran isn't just another country, it's a major civilization that deserves a big role on the world stage.
So let's fast forward through some really pivotal moments. In the 7th century, the region is conquered and Islam arrives. Then in the 20th century, the British discover oil, and with it comes huge foreign influence. This all comes to a head in 1953 when a coup engineered by the US and the UK gets rid of Iran's democratically elected leader. That foreign interference? It left a really deep scar of resentment, and it directly set the stage for the massive, earth-shaking event of 1979, the Islamic Revolution.
And this quote from the revolution's leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, just says it all. He established a new Islamic republic built on this foundation of fierce independence and a deep suspicion of foreign powers, especially the United States. The goal was to sever those foreign hands for good.
And this hostility wasn't just talk. It was cemented in the most dramatic way possible just a few months after the revolution when students stormed the American embassy in Tehran. For 444 agonizing days, the whole world just watched. The crisis did end, but it led to crippling international sanctions and created this deep, lasting animosity with the West that really defines Iranian foreign policy to this day.
So that's the historical foundation. And that history, that revolution, and that deep anti-Western feeling, it didn't just stay in the past. Nope, it became the blueprint for the complex web of conflict we see playing out right now.
This chant literally became the rallying cry of the revolution. It wasn't just some slogan, it was a declaration of a new world order, at least from Iran's perspective. The regime positioned itself as the region's leading anti-US power, and that stance would guide its alliances and its enemies for decades to come. Now, tensions have flared up many times since the revolution, but a major flashpoint came in 2020. The US assassinated Qasem Soleimani, one of Iran's most powerful and influential generals. For Iran, this was a direct act of war. For the US, it was taking out a key figure they blamed for violence all across the region. And the consequences are still very much playing out. In just the 4 months after the Israel-Gaza war began in late 2023, U.S. bases in the Middle East faced 170 attacks from Iran-backed militias. That's a staggering 20-fold increase. And it shows you exactly how Iran uses these regional conflicts to apply pressure on its #1 adversary, the U.S.
So, how does Iran fight these battles without starting a huge, all-out war? Well, it uses a strategy that's come to be known as the axis of resistance. You really have to understand this concept. Think of it as Iran's main tool for foreign policy. It's a network of allied groups and militias that lets it project power and deter attacks, all while keeping the fighting far, far away from its own soil.
The members of this axis form this kind of strategic ring around Iran's rivals. You've got Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis down in Yemen, and then various militias in Iraq and Syria. Now, it's not a simple puppet-master relationship. It's not like they just take direct orders, but their goals often line up with Tehran's, and their actions are frequently coordinated, which creates a really powerful, unified front.
And among all these groups, one of them really stands out. Hezbollah in Lebanon is often called the crown jewel of the Axis, and for good reason. They are by far the most capable and well-armed of Iran's partners, and they pose a significant and direct military threat right on Israel's northern border.
But the US and Israel aren't Iran's only adversaries, not by a long shot. A massive regional rivalry exists with Saudi Arabia. This is essentially a battle for dominance in the Muslim world, and it's often framed as a conflict between Iran, the region's biggest Shia power, and Saudi Arabia, its biggest Sunni power.
This rivalry often plays out in proxy wars, and a perfect example of this is Yemen. There, Iran backs the Houthi rebels who are fighting a coalition led by, you guessed it, Saudi Arabia. So by supporting the Houthis, Iran directly challenges and undermines its chief regional competitor.
This all leads us to our final section, because when you put all these pieces together, the history, the rivalries, the proxy network, you see that they all serve one ultimate goal. And it's not about conquest, it's a grand strategy for survival.
This entire strategy was forged in the fire of the 1980s during the absolutely devastating 8-year war with Iraq. It was a brutal, brutal conflict fought on Iranian soil, and it had a traumatic impact on the nation. The key lesson Iran learned was to do everything in its power to keep any future fight far away from its own borders. Never again.
So, what does that strategy actually look like in practice? Well, it's a pretty clear 3-part doctrine. First, develop a powerful missile program to act as a deterrent, to make anyone think twice. Second, use that axis of resistance to project power and fight your battles abroad. And third, the golden rule. Avoid a direct conventional war with a major power at all costs.
And this brings us to the critical paradox at the very heart of Iran's strategy. From Tehran's perspective, everything we've talked about, the proxies, the missiles, it's all purely defensive. It's what they believe is necessary for survival. But to its neighbors and rivals, these exact same actions look deeply offensive and are seen as the main source of instability in the entire region.
This, of course, brings us to the ultimate escalation. The fear among Western powers and Israel is that Iran's search for the ultimate deterrent won't stop with missiles and proxies. The absolute red line for them is Iran getting a nuclear weapon, something they have all vowed to prevent.
And make no mistake, this is not some distant, abstract threat. After the US pulled out of that big nuclear deal back in 2018, Iran basically floored the accelerator on its program. By late 2023, some US intelligence assessments concluded that Iran was closer than ever, potentially just weeks away from having the material needed for a bomb.
Which leaves us with a final and pretty provocative question. For a nation so obsessed with self-preservation, with deterring its powerful enemies, will its grand strategy inevitably lead it to seek the one thing it believes can guarantee its survival forever? Is the ultimate deterrent a nuclear one?